I loved Assassin's Creed growing up. It was one of those franchises that every time they revealed a new entry in the franchise, it was something to be excited about, especially during the 360 PS3 era with the Ezio trilogy, and honestly, even Assassin's Creed 3. I'm one of those guys. After the release of Unity, things started to go downhill. Instead of being a spearhead of open world game design, Ubisoft started to trend chase. RPG games were starting to take off in gaming, so Assassin's Creed started to get into the fold. Origins was a new direction for the franchise and quite honestly was a hit among people, even for me. Bayek was an amazing protagonist, telling the story for the origins of the Assassins was interesting and wanted, and ancient Egypt as a setting was executed perfectly. But then Odyssey happened. Don't get me wrong, I loved Odyssey, but only specifically as an RPG sandbox. Odyssey as an Assassin's Creed game was genuine dog puke. The modern day was not interesting at all. The actual game focused more on mythical aspects and level grinding than focusing on assassins and Templars in their conflict. There were no assassins or Templars whatsoever, only imitations that never held any interest. It didn't look or feel like an Assassin's Creed game, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Not only that, but when Valhalla came out, those criticisms were dialed all the way up to 11. The game was too big for its own good. The story was interesting in certain instances, but failed to capture my full attention, which only deteriorated the farther I got into the game. It also felt like the structure was butchered. Side quests were awful and took maybe a total of 5 minutes. The main missions felt sporadic, with each tackling a different plot with the game. And again, the mythical shit was here as well when it didn't need to be. Tackling the bad decisions Ubisoft has made with Assassin's Creed would have to be a separate video entirely. But to get to the point, I was skeptical at first with Black Flag Resynced. Ubisoft has not done a good job as of recently, and to remake one of the most beloved Assassin's Creed games was not only unneeded, but also a tall task. If there are any mistakes, fans are going to be all over that shit like dogs. This was a unique situation for me. Believe it or not, I've never finished Black Flag. The first time I tried it on PS3, I just never jived with the game. The naval combat that everyone loved was something I disliked. To me at least, Assassin's Creed is known for its parkour, so when you make like 75% of the map water, that limits your ability to do, well, parkour. I also just wasn't very good with the naval combat. Judge me, I don't care. I was like 13 at the time, but it felt way too hard for me, and I guess ever since then, I never touched the game again. But this year, all the way back before Black Flag Remake was the worst kept secret in gaming, I added it back to the backlog. It was time to play this damn game. I was smart enough to wait because shortly after the remake got announced and showed off, and here we are today. There was no longer an excuse to not play this game. The updated visuals looked insane, the cutscenes looked better than ever, the combat got reworked. For the first time in a long time, I got excited about a new Assassin's Creed game. I guess it's not new, but you know what I mean. From the title, you could probably infer that this game is damn good. Black Flag Resynced made me fall in love with Assassin's Creed all over again. I mentioned already that when I initially played Black Flag on the PS3, it wasn't my cup of tea, mostly because of the naval combat edition as well as the parkouriness seemingly not being the focus anymore. I think after playing the RPG trilogy, I guess this time around I was less harsh about the fact. Fortunately, I'm dead wrong. What was I even thinking back then? There are plenty of areas to parkour. The main cities are big enough to have their own playground. Havana, being one of the bigger areas in the game, genuinely surprised me about how much freedom I had running around rooftops, trees, and even some interiors. But I think one of the bigger surprises for me was how much I enjoyed the naval combat this time around. I started to understand why everyone loved the addition to the series. I started to understand which way to orient my ship to get the maximum output, when to use which weapons such as the barrels or the swivel gun, or even being able to choose flaming cannons or not. I think the issue back then wasn't necessarily how to control the ship or anything like that. I just think I didn't have a sense of level scaling. More towards the south of the map, you'll see the more dangerous ships out on the water, your man-of-wars and your big frigates, and even sometimes you'll find yourself in the middle of a firefight between two factions. I know this is a more common system in games where two factions fight each other and it doesn't involve you, but it just feels different when it's naval combat. It genuinely feels like you're in the thick of it. In the original Black Flag, since I wasn't having the best time with it, it's accurate to say that I didn't make it far into the narrative. I maybe got to the point during the last battle with Blackbeard and I just never finished it. Because of that, I never got to experience the culmination of Edward's arc and how he connects with the Assassins and Templars. After now beating the game, that last half of the game is a genuine whirlwind and makes the story worth experiencing. In the beginning, it's very slow and very character oriented, establishing Edward as a character. I understand that seems normal for every game nowadays, but when you do play, it's slow. You do some bullshit with other pirates, learn about the island all of them inhabit, and you only get a sliver of some Templar action every now and then that advances the big plot. As an adult, these types of games don't bother me as much anymore. After all, one of my favorite series of all time, Persona, has an objectively worse onboarding process with dozens of hours of the game just shooting the shit with other characters. It was so much better experiencing the narrative now where I can digest it instead of being a goldfish that has an awful attention span. Because this game, in terms of story, really demands your attention to know exactly what's going on and how certain events affects Edward as a character. But with all that said, what exactly about the remake caused me to purchase that instead of the original? After all, nothing beats the original, right? And honestly, it just came down to the timing of it all and the overhauls made to combat. To address the elephant in the room, yes, Black Flag Resynced is a significant improvement over the original in terms of graphical fidelity. But is it one of the main things that swayed me to this game? No, not really. Just because I've been backlog gaming a lot recently, I'm just not as sensitive to older looking games. The nostalgia aspect of something is what now gets my attention in modern gaming. But when it comes to combat and gameplay systems, I drastically favor the games nowadays for obvious reasons. There's just better controlling games nowadays. So when I saw the major change to combat on various reviews across YouTube, that got me interested. As everyone knows, old Assassin's Creed combat suffered from extremely easy difficulty. Most of the time, we all just parried and counterattacked to insta-kill enemies and then chain them together. Admittedly, it was entertaining in some instances because of that power fantasy. After a while though, it gets numbingly boring. It wasn't until I think Unity where I believe they got things right. Combat had shades of its former self, but revitalized it by making the game more difficult, enticing the player to rather engage with stealth and parkour, you know, the fucking identity of the game. And of course, as soon as they got that combat right, they up and changed it again for more RPG focused systems, and it drastically reduced the fun factor when it came to stealth because of how dumbed down it was. During the leak cycle, it was reported loads of times that they would overhaul the combat system and tune it more to the likes of the RPG trilogy. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and the combat is more of a hybrid between old and new. At first, I thought this was the weird marriage of the two. Would it really be that fun? I don't know, but the reviews were raving. It was a combat system back to form, but with new twists. It's not difficult to master, but it isn't brain-swellingly easy like the games on older generations. This hooked me immediately, and if it succeeded enough with the fans, there's hope that this combat could be the new going forward. Another thing that hooked me on the game is something very obscure. I'm not sure if this was in the original when it first came out, but it's the island management for Inagua, the being able to upgrade certain shops, straight up unlock them to earn passive income, manage your fleet to get passive rewards. It's not at all as in-depth as what they did with Shadows with like the base management, but that was a mechanic I liked in that game, and it's great to see it expanded with Resynced. I guess expand is not the right word, but you know, the same types of system is there. I mentioned that I had a rough time with the naval combat the first go around. I think another thing that got me interested with the remake was the systems they used for Skull and Bones and how they're implementing them here. Although I haven't played that game, the one thing I didn't hear was people complaining about the ship combat. And after playing it for this game, oh yeah, it feels great. It's great to engage with. Things are snappier, all the upgrades felt meaningful, and it retained some sense of difficulty, especially when going up against the Ghost Mana warships. Exploration is huge for Assassin's Creed games, especially since it's a glorified collectathon most of the time, especially when it comes to older games. Granted, there are times where it can be annoying to get everything on the map. It has its unique fun as well, especially the music pages for different sea shanties. Sea shanties slap in this game. Being able to work towards being able to listen to more of them is a unique collectathon that I never thought I would like. I also think the treasure hunt aspect of the game was very addictive. Normally, I would hate having these treasure chests littered all over the map in the main menu. That Ubisoft aspect of games irks me to my core. But when it specifically came to these treasure chests, I didn't mind it so much. It mostly stemmed from money not necessarily coming easy, because everything you have to upgrade in this game, you use money, like you use it all the time. Also, just the actual activity of finding them was fun. Diving deep into the ocean with sharks on my tail, navigating through tight hallways of ships only to find a small chest that carried maybe 400 doubloons. It's such a meme to say this, but I actually felt like a pirate here, desperate for gold. Not only finding these chests were fun on land and sea, but some huge chests carry a blueprint for fully upgrading your ship, or even it may carry legendary gear or assassin uniforms. One of my favorite collectathons for this game was getting the keys to unlock the Templar armor at the hideout. Not only because it was locked behind semi-interesting quests, but the uniform was interesting, and the gear that came along with it was worth it. And to add on to this, I haven't even finished it, but the Mayan hunts to unlock the armor there is even interesting to get as well. Although the puzzles to find them aren't the hardest thing in the world, it was fun to engage with. And you know in the end it will be worth it because gear you unlock. And just thinking back about what I love about exploration here, of course there are icons on the map on where to find things, but most of the time, exploration for me didn't even start with pulling up the map and heading somewhere. It was just sailing out randomly and naturally coming across things I either didn't see at first, or it was my first time seeing in the first place. One of my favorite places I came across was this cave. I think it was called Jingwei. This cave was just a bunch of enemy pirates with loads of treasure inside. This place was honestly nothing special, but it was one of the first things I found out exploring without using the map or the compass. I found it completely organically and it was loads of fun, which is the important thing. There was another time when I was looking at the map and I saw this pyramid looking symbol that I have never seen before. My mind initially went to the Mayan collectible, and I needed some anyway, so might as well take a look. Well, I was right, but also there was so much more here than I thought. It's blanketed with enemies, multiple chests that you can find. The environmental storytelling at times was pretty good. Some of the time, there are shipwrecks near the shore that allows you to go diving and find some treasure, and some secret chests that you have to look a little harder than others. It just felt like anywhere I went, it would be worth it in the end for a multitude of reasons. I would get gold to upgrade my ship and gear. Maybe I found some schematics for a new upgrade, animals that I could skin to upgrade my holsters or health. Bro, I even found Sir Francis Drake's swords on a random island I was fucking around on. It was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had while playing games. One of the more dramatic examples of exploration, stumbling upon something cool, would be encountering my first ghost ship fight. I was just sailing the seas, seeing where the wind would take me, when I looked at the compass. I saw an icon of a ship, and I was curious. Right when I entered the vicinity, I knew I messed up. It immediately aggroed and threw everything it had at me. I failed miserably. I'm not even joking. It wasn't even a fight. And if I'm honest, I haven't beaten one of these ships yet because of just how hard they are to beat. I find it so relieving to play this game and not be bored out of my mind like I was with Valhalla. Valhalla was long, uninteresting, and exploration wasn't fun. It wasn't anywhere near as fun as what I'm experiencing now. It made me think of how stupid I was for not playing this game all the way back the first time. Naval combat hooked me more than I thought it would initially, especially when it came to taking on man-of-wars and bigger ships in the game. There was one weapon on the ship in particular that I thought changed the game for me over the first, and that would be the mortar. This thing is great for taking bases and bigger ships. I struggled a lot with unfortunately being too far away from enemies to even being able to get a hit in. You didn't want to be too close because it felt like you were more in danger. so having the ability to be at range and still do a substantial amount of damage made a difference. It also felt like I was managing all different weapons at the right pace. I would use my flaming cannons, hit the mortars right after, quickly use the swivel guns to get some extra damage in, and if it was charged, I would ram right after that. It was a pattern that I thought worked, and it was a combat routine that I used for most of the game and never got bored with. I bet others that play have their own combos that they use. For instance, I rarely use the exploding barrels, but I bet others use them constantly. It was also great to see that there weren't many trailing missions while using the Jackdaw. I never made it too far when I initially played, and without being spoiled all these years, that was the one thing I was worried about. Besides like one mission that felt more on rails and scripted, which I think all of you know which mission I'm talking about. But even then, it was more fun and action-packed rather than something that annoyed me. But ever since then, the tailing missions were mostly restricted to only on foot. And even if you got caught by specific NPCs, it wouldn't fail the mission. Instead, a combat encounter or a chase would ensue. Probably the highlight of the changes made with the remake. There is an addition made in the remake that had a lot of people up in arms, and that would be the recruitable lieutenants and their stories. The reason people don't like the additions as much is the narrative behind them, and a lot of it admittedly is uninteresting. And the cutscenes that were added just feel very out of place in the grand scheme of things. Like, look at these stiff animations. Thankfully, they patched it to where Edward isn't just smiling awkwardly during the entire conversation with his hands on his hips. I think Ubisoft just needs to ditch the non-mocapped cutscenes. It just looks very low quality and breaks immersion. Jumping from a mocap scene to this in a matter of 10 minutes can be jarring. But when it comes to the main reason why this game in particular had me falling in love with Assassin's Creed all over again, would have to be its well-written narrative. As far as main characters go for the franchise, Edward is genuinely side by side with Ezio for me personally, but for different reasons. Ezio was with us for 3 games. That character was built over years and was established in our childhood. Ezio went through the arc of young, angry boy who was learning the realities of the world to an older and wise assassin in which he proved himself to lead the Creed, all the way to being an elder, understanding the teachings in which Altair established. Edward's arc is simple, but extremely effective, having a character get a change of heart. To look back on his old ways and realize he was going in the wrong direction. A sense of redemption, learning that there is more to life than the open seas and some change in his pocket. I remember how the first scene played out back in the day with Caroline and Edward, but seeing it here again felt like it was my first time. Honestly, I forgot what good storytelling looked like from an Ubisoft game until I witnessed this. The dynamic between the two felt charming, yet there was a sense of tension. Edward grew up poor, Caroline rich. It makes sense. The story angle of Edward not already being an assassin, but stumbling upon it was interesting as well. Assuming the identity of Duncan Walpole only for a little bit of coin for a thing he knows nothing about. It also sets up his character. He loves money and cares for his pirate friends. Anything else doesn't matter. And coming across Stede Bonnet again, it was great, man. I always remember this guy being funny the first time I played, but after seeing through his story now, I don't know. It feels very sad. Anyways, to summarize the plot briefly to make things easier to explain from here on out, after finding himself in the middle of a Templar meeting, Edward learns about a location called the Observatory, a place where you can see through anybody's eyes if you have a vial of the sage's blood. The Templars want to use it to control the population and mold it into what they think is peace and freedom, whereas the assassins want to hide its secrets. It was not made for the eyes of humanity. And Edward here is the outlier in the middle of everything. He wants to steal whatever this observatory is and sell it to the highest bidder, all in the name of having enough money to make it home to his wife so they can live happily ever after. The overall theme that is being established here is growth. At first, yes, Edward is in it for the money, but can he change? Will there be a moment when he realizes that Caroline wasn't with him for money's sake? She was with him because she loved him. Edward was blinded by pride. Will that pride be shed for something greater? The trap that the Assassin's Creed series falls into nowadays is this revenge trope. For the series at least, it's the easiest thing to lean on. Considering it worked with the start of the Ezio series, why won't it work with all the other games? AC3, Connor's village burns down from the hands of Charles Lee, revenge story. Origins, Bayek's son dies, revenge story. Odyssey, your dad kills your sibling and throws you off a cliff, revenge story. Shadows, village gets slaughtered, revenge story. The games that didn't fall into this trope, good or bad, I always respected. AC1 is more focused on the foundation of the war between assassins and Templars, felt more historical and mystery driven rather than revenge. AC Revelations, it was Ezio's last hurrah. It was more nostalgic driven than revenge. Unity, it tried to tell an engaging love story, in my opinion. Although there was some revenge in the story, it wasn't the forefront. And of course, Black Flag. It was less about revenge and more about the redemption of a character. What I'm getting to is, this game made me realize the revenge trope that is ever so common is just old at this point. I'm not saying ditch it entirely, but give it a few games. Give me an Assassin's Creed game about self-discovery, details about the Assassins and Templars, or something entirely unique. I think that plays a part in why people love this game so much. It's different in terms of how it tackles the main story. Edward isn't an assassin. He isn't driven by a lust for revenge or justice. Actually, Edward is a genuine piece of shit for quite a bit of the game, but I love it for that, and that payoff at the end makes everything worth it. One of the aspects of the game that I loved was the camaraderie and brotherhood between each of the well-known pirates of the age. Thatch and Hornigold in the beginning give off brotherly vibes, always argue with each other, but only over disagreements for the betterment of Nassau, and Edward felt like the son of the two. Sort of like what Hosea and Dutch were to Arthur. Vane and Rackham felt like the brothers of Edward, always getting into trouble, a lot of the time annoying, but during Endgame you've come to look back on those characters and wish they were still there. But then my favorite characters, Mary Read and Anne Bonny, felt like the sisters that actually cared for Edward. They thought the world of him, they brought out the good in him, more specifically Mary Read because of that assassin connection. Then we have Adewale, the first mate. Although his character is more fleshed out in the spin-off, the act of being the person that talked sense to Edward whenever he needed it was nice to witness. Towards the middle of the game, we unfortunately get to see the downfall of these pirates. The first of which starts with arguments between Thatch and Hornigold over medicine for the citizens of Nassau. It's a tough side to take because neither is wrong. Hornigold wants as little bloodshed as possible with England. The last thing they need is them on their tail, as well as that medicine could be for other sick people. Thatch doesn't care at all. If he has to kill to take the medicine for the people of Nassau, he will do it no question. Each side has a point and it's hard to take one. As one can guess, this scenario doesn't play out where everything is happy. Thatch unfortunately can't help himself and decides to attack ships in order to get medicine, albeit this happens after Edward fails to find intact medicine at the bottom of the ocean. I don't know why they thought that would work. I mean, it's at the bottom of the ocean, so. The result of this is Thatch going down the path of obsession with getting this medicine and spiraling, even going as far as to hold soldiers hostage to barter for that medicine. In the end, sure, we get it, but Thatch gets killed shortly after an ambush takes place. Thatch's demise is a product of his actions, one that Edward and Hornigold warned him about. It was a sad death because it felt like Thatch was the only one besides Edward that genuinely cared about safeguarding Nassau and believed in a land filled with free men. Just his character arc of first coming across him and him feeling like a brother parental figure, and across the game you saw him fall into this persona that he made for himself. It comes off as a joke to scare people, although when it came to innocence he never hurt them. You could tell he was having fun with what he was doing, and thinking about it, maybe that's why he had that conversation with Edward about retiring, being a pirate, and instead just sailing off to wherever, to leave the life he lived. Maybe instead it was a realization that Nassau could never prosper like they wanted, opting to rather leave it all behind and forget about it. On the other hand, it felt like Hornigold took the easy way with the Templars. During the beginning, there were doubts sown in early to where his inevitable betrayal wasn't exactly a surprise. He wanted to free Nassau, but didn't exactly think men doing as they please was best for the island. And after seeing sickness and death plague the island later on, his stance shifted, rather give freedom through control. And it's interesting because I don't think Hornigold is exactly wrong. Nassau was indeed a lost cause. You can visually see that throughout the game. He also didn't want to steal things from the British, not only to lay low, but to also not risk lives in the process. And you can see why his morals shifted with the Templars because of this. He witnessed firsthand that men have a hard time governing themselves. Even Thatch saw this, which is why he decided to leave it all behind. I think there's a sense of respect with Hornigold. He ran with his convictions. He did what he thought was right. It all wraps up nicely when Edward assassinates Hornigold. It was an argument that I think opened the doors for Edward's eventual 180. It puts into perspective that yes, what Hornigold did, betraying his former friends, was shitty. Although his conviction was strong, it was wrongfully placed. Men shouldn't control other men unwillingly. But Edward isn't the best person either. Edward at this point only cares about plundering, stealing gold, getting rich, and funding the observatory with Roberts. This present course will end badly if it keeps going. He will alienate the others he cared about in the end because of that tunnel vision. He is a no better person than Hornigold is, which is what makes this interrogation scene so memorable. Remember that scene in AC3 with Connor and Haytham debating the morality about which side truly desired peace, with Haytham kind of bodying Connor in the end? It sort of felt like that here, but lighter. Through this interrogation, albeit not immediately, Edward starts to understand the errors of his ways, especially after the betrayal of Roberts. Getting into the best characters in the game, Mary Read and Anne Bonny, they were great, especially towards the end of the game. Mary Read, or James Kidd, was a character that you could tell immediately that they were a good person, if that makes sense. It's only backed up later on when Edward finds out that she is part of the Brotherhood. What I found great is even before this, she's wary of Edward after finding him in the robes of Walpole and listening to what he had to say about the observatory, and that directly leading towards her trying to recruit him. Understanding his skills. What makes the relationship between the two so great is the constant nagging of Mary to Edward about correcting his course. Not necessarily reprimanding him, only during certain instances, but more so just doing her best to steer him toward the right path. Inevitably, it doesn't work, only Edward can fix what he has done, but just the act of trying is what made her character great. You can tell the care she has for him, the history they have together. It's unfortunate that through a good chunk of the game, there aren't many interactions between the two, at least until Edward, all of them coincidentally, get arrested around the same time and get sent to jail. This being after Edward gets left for dead after being betrayed by Roberts. The start of his redemption, you could say. After admitting that both Anne and Mary are pregnant, their lives are spared, but with the caveat that Mary isn't making it out of prison. After giving birth, she gets sick and is dying. While trying his best to help her out of prison, it's no use. This is the one instance that truly steers Edward towards the right direction, to honor Mary's last request. Instead of only caring for himself and lining his pockets, he takes a different path. A path that won't end with him dying alone, instead protecting others. And with that, she will always be with him. And Bonnie, on the other hand, was sort of a background character during the beginning of the game, only managing the bar in Nassau. Anne and Edward have their moments for sure, but it's mostly conversations about other characters such as Thatch and Hornigold. But it isn't until later, after the death of Mary, that Anne and Edward become closer. It's not until they make it to the assassin hideout that they have a heart-to-heart.
Edward. Everyone's gone, aren't they? Mary, Raccoon, Patch, all the rest. I miss them so. Rough as they were. Do you feel that too? All empty inside?
I do. Devil curse me. I do.
Don't get me wrong, I love Adewale as the quartermaster. The relationship between him and Edward was great and balanced, but I think I like Anne as the quartermaster a lot more, even with the less banter and screen time. Maybe it's because of the emotional significance. Maybe it's only because of the quartermaster change that I wasn't expecting at all. Keep in mind, this is coming from someone that hasn't played the Adewale spinoff, so please don't murder me. I don't know, I just think it was a great way of progressing the narrative and it all made sense. Adewale doing his own thing with the assassins and Anne coming into her own and assuming the quartermaster role alongside Edward. It's a shame that she chose to not join the assassins, but it makes sense for her character. She's the type to forge her own path. But with all that said, Black Flag's ending is probably the main reason why this game made me fall in love with the series again. And it really starts once Edward understands the errors of his ways and decides to join the assassins. Not only to correct the mistakes he once made and honor Mary, but to also become a better man out of it, to learn selflessness, to make sense of the world rather than steal from it. The sequence of events taking out Rogers and Torres was great, both gameplay-wise and narratively. What I loved about the mission was the fact that it was so open in how you want to complete it. At first, it seems the game wants you to use social stealth to complete your goal, but you can totally run around on rooftops, fire from a distance, literally anything you want. And personally, I love it when the game presents social stealth to you. It always seems like the most satisfying thing to accomplish in Assassin's Creed games. Although his interrogation scene isn't much, at least in my opinion, I do love in the end they found a way to agree with each other, to take out Roberts. In the end, there was no disrespect between the two. The assassination of Torres, if I'm honest, was so much easier than Rogers for whatever reason. Maybe it's because you have plenty of rooftop to run around on with this mission compared to Rogers, but even so, it was a fun mission. I know this twist should have not surprised me one bit, but the fact that this Torres was a fake, it had me gasping in my seat like a little girl. When games do this, I kind of have to go along with it even when it doesn't make much sense. Like, just think about it. Did Torres really know that Edward was going after him that specific day? I mean, maybe, but I just find it hard to believe. I thought the twist was surprising enough, and I'm glad it was the case because assassinating him in the observatory made so much more sense. And with the height of the plot, with this being towards the end of the game, yes, I preferred it here. I love the fact that even Torres knew the change that happened with Edward in the interrogation scene. Torres understanding the conviction in Edward's heart is important. In the beginning, Edward only cared about things personal. Whatever happened around him didn't matter. He was selfish, conceited, there was no conviction, and if there was, it was only monetary. Edward now understands the path he was going down. He knew he needed to change, to fight for a greater purpose, to fight for Addie, to fight for Anne, to fight for Mary, even Caroline. He's no longer fighting for himself. The fact that it's noticeable and that Torres respects that, it really puts into perspective the journey we all went on. But killing Roberts left an entirely different feeling for me after the fact, and it may be a negative one. One of the few in the game, and it has to do with the lack of modern day segments in the game to further the narrative. Although I haven't beaten the original, I do know one of the main plots of the modern day in the game was connected with Roberts and the Sage, them being almost identical, and I guess since the modern day in this game is non-existent, the story fell unfinished. But just ignoring that for a quick second, I did like Roberts as a villain, more so than Torres if I'm honest. Aside from the fact that Torres is more of a side villain, Roberts not being a Templar or assassin was a big reason why I liked him as a villain. A villain that is a neutral party is very interesting, and with him being a sage makes this fact even more interesting, introducing new motives, being connected with the ones who came before. I think it's miles more interesting, especially when his sage blood is what activates the observatory itself. His want of the observatory, with the reason being more selfish driven rather than the Templars' ideology, I think it's a wrinkle that Assassin's Creed needs to dive into more. My favorite part of the game, and I think this goes for everyone, would have to be the very end scene after Edward sends his letter to Caroline in England. First off, after getting a letter back and learning that Caroline unfortunately passed away was sad. The fact that it was inferred rather than read aloud during this certain scene fit everything so much better. You can understand the words he read by just his body language and the expression on his face. It goes without saying, but that realization that through this entire game, Edward's only goal was to get rich in order to get back home to his wife and have a relaxing life, only for that to backfire, for him not to be there with her during her death, and not being there with her during the birth of their child. In the end, Edward became a better man because of the journey he went on. He'll never get what he truly wanted. I do think the ending scene with Anne singing that beautiful song with Jen coming off the boat with Edward meeting her, it does make this entire thing worth it. Because in the end, Edward can't be the husband he always wanted to be, but he can become the father he should be. And this scene proves that. He tries, getting his daughter flowers, sailing back home to England, and the first conversation he has with his daughter, I was tearing up laughing a little bit at the comment Jen makes about pirates possibly roaming the ocean and her asking to pilot the ship. Like, yeah, she sure is his daughter. And it just makes things feel so much better to know that when you're watching this, you could see Edward's change. He's a totally different person. I just think this ending fit perfectly for what this story was trying to tell. Edward changed as a person. He went from a gold-loving pirate who only cared about himself to a loving father that has deep regret for what he's done. He understands his mistakes and wants to take the effort to rectify them. He chooses to leave all of it behind for a better future, to start a family. I think the narrative of Edward not being a true assassin until very late in the game was a great decision and made that plot point relevant through the entire game, but it wasn't the focal point. Just think about how different a narrative this was at the time compared to the other Assassin's Creed games that released. Altair grew wisdom while being an assassin. Same with Ezio, same with Connor. I think Edward was the first one to learn selflessness before officially becoming an assassin. Just for Edward as a character, it worked so well for him. If he was an assassin the entire game, it would have been like another Ezio, essentially. And think about Unity right after this. It would have been like the same narrative 2 games in a row, at least in my opinion. Maybe I need to replay Unity. But bringing this video full circle, why did Black Flag Resynced make me fall in love with the series all over again? It's because the narrative was dramatically different than what I was used to in the series. It was a breath of fresh air from what we've seen from the RPG games, Shadows. Like, during those times, I'm not gonna lie, shit was bleak. Cutscenes had their Ubisoft stank on them. Characters felt stiff. The story felt out of place. The games felt more fantasy than a historical fiction. It just was not it. But this remake brought to light what we all love about the series. It went back to the roots. Great storytelling that is always centered around assassins and Templars and deals with the historical fiction and not fantasy. No over-the-top boss fights that you can find in every RPG, and instead has unique enemy types and pseudo boss fights that made the series what it was. Assassin's Creed's biggest failure was trying to chase a trend and revisiting the same themes over and over again. RPG was a trend back in the late 2010s and still is now, but that bar has been raised so significantly that I don't think Assassin's Creed will ever top it, especially when it's an Ubisoft IP. AC fans love open world sandbox, but they also love its linear nature. When people think of Assassin's Creed, we immediately think of the Ezio trilogy. Do you know anybody that immediately thinks of Valhalla, Shadows, Odyssey? No, they don't, and that's the problem. I said this before, but AC chases the revenge theme way too much, and I think that those that played Shadows for a good length of time started to understand the downfall of that. Shit got boring so fast. It's overused in the series. Black Flag is a completely different tale, and that's what gets people hooked. You're telling me that this dude isn't an assassin for 90% of the game, isn't a good person during that time. The story dabbles just a tad bit with the Isu storyline, and in the end manages to tell an emotional story about selflessness and learning to become a better man, and connects everything we love about Assassin's Creed seamlessly. Sign me up, dude. AC is at its best when it tells an emotional, resonating story. Not some collectathon skill tree, has nothing to do with Assassins and Templars, fantasy boss fight slop fest. We have too many games like that. AC needs to be itself. That's what we always loved about the series. But just to be real for a second and not glaze Black Flag Resynced, there are additions here that should be not the norm going forward. For one, everybody hates the stiff animations, non-mocapped cutscenes. If you're wanting to include those, just play out a conversation normally in-game. That way things don't seem out of place and odd, especially with the creepy animations that Edward displays. I think that is the #1 criticism going forward. I am also one of the few people that believes they truly need to overhaul the parkour. It feels like things haven't changed since the first game, where you get caught on geometry constantly to the point where it disrupts scripted scenes playing out. When I was playing AC2 and Brotherhood, this annoyed the shit out of me. It was no different here. If they touch up this system even more, it will go a long way. I genuinely believe parkour in these games peaked during Unity, and if they can go back to those animations they use there, ooh, it'll be a treat. And finally, although there were some incomplete story implications because of the removal of the modern day, I still think it's best to not include it going forward. It's just not needed. After the story conclusion with Desmond, it just hasn't been interesting for multiple games now. From now on, maybe just include some Easter eggs here and there for the modern day, some like database entries or something. But that is a personal recommendation. I know countless people will disagree with me. But regardless, Black Flag Resynced succeeded in what I was expecting from it, and Ubisoft should go back to its roots for games going forward. After all, it's the reason we fell in love with these games in the first place. Stop chasing trends with RPGs and loot barf. AC needs to be its own thing that it established back then. Be an open world narrative sandbox. It needs to be itself. If they do that, I'll be there day one. Just like, look at the Steam charts of Resynced. Look at everyone buying this game. Look at the sales. Learn from it. People want what AC used to be. Black Flag and back. Stick to that. Add some cool additions within the framework. Once you do that, I think Assassin's Creed is going to explode more so than it already has. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. I'm super passionate about AC because it was like one of my favorite series when I'm younger. Now that I'm older in my adult years, seeing what it's become before AC Resynced, I'm just not proud of it. And I wanted to see it go back to what it used to be. You know, I've seen recently they had leadership change. Hopefully that's going to be a good thing. And from what it looks like, it will. If you liked the video, comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you liked from this game. Tell me what you want changed going forward. Are you excited for Assassin's Creed Hexe coming out whenever that's coming out? Just let me know, and maybe we all agree. But see you guys in the next video. It'll be soon. Have a good one.